Hi and welcome back to my channel, and in this video we're going to be looking at how to set up a community interest company with no money and wait for grant funding to come in to cover all of your setup costs. So I'm going to be looking at all my tips of how to set up with no money of investment, how to get grant funding in as quickly as possible, and how to budget properly on your grant funding forms so that you cover all of your business setup costs. So before I jump into that useful video, please hit the subscribe button to subscribe to everything on this channel, which is related to community interest companies, social enterprises, and anything to do with grant funding. I'm a specialist in this. I've been doing it myself for the last 10 years, successfully running CICs, getting grant funding, and also now in the last year, I've been helping other people set up their CICs, and I have a course which helps that, which is called How to Set Up a CIC and Get Grant Funded in 4 months, which is over on my website. So do go check that out, because that will literally fast track you through the application process and get you to the point where you're getting grant funding. So that aside, let's get into it. So if you are at a point where you've got no money, or if you have got money, but I still recommend you don't put that money in personally, because it's always ideal for any business that you only use the money that is coming into the business as income to cover all of your overheads. You should never put yourself in a position where you are giving a lot of your personal income into a business that might not work, because then that is of course a risk. So to incorporate a CIC, all that you'll have to pay is £27. £27 is all that you need to set it up on Companies House, and that is paid by PayPal just online. Aside from that £27, you can then do quite a few things for free. So before you do your applications and get your grant funding in, you'll have a period of time where you can work on your CIC, but a number of things that you can do can be for free. For example, setting up your social media. So you don't need to pay out for a website yet, you should be waiting for that, but you can set up your presence online through social media. And that is really important, because grant funders will go and look at your social media presence. So in a way, social media has actually become more important than a website anyway. So do go and set up your Instagram and your Facebook, maybe a TikTok or YouTube if you feel like that's what's right for you. I do recommend Canva, which is also free, to fill up your social media pages. Canva is a great editing tool and gives you lots of different, like Instagram, for instance, templates that you can use that look really professional and will just get your social media going. Obviously, in this stage, you're going to be volunteering your time as well. So you're going to be volunteering your time to the setup, to doing things like setting up your social media. And also in this time, you're going to be doing things like engaging with your community. So you're going to be going around trying to partner with different organisations, telling people that you're setting up and you're applying for funding, and just making those connections. So that will take some work. So you will be volunteering at that stage your time. So you don't need to spend out money on staff. You can just volunteer your time, and maybe you've got some other volunteers that might help you as well. It's not a lot of work, but it's doing things like getting feedback forms, like I said, doing partner meetings and stuff like that, doing meetings with your directors and just planning. All that takes time. And of course, you will also be needing to write your applications. Now, I recommend that you write your applications yourself. I do not think you should be going to bid writers. Bid writers are expensive, they don't know your project, they don't have your passion, and I find generally that having a bid writer write your application is a bad idea. I often see people who have done that and they just get rejected, and I just think it's a waste of money. Plus, it's good for you to train and learn to do your applications yourself. It's just not a viable business if you're going to be paying out hundreds and hundreds of pounds to bid writers to write your applications. So whilst it might seem like a good idea, because then you don't have to do it, it really isn't a sustainable model. Now, if you have got maybe dyslexia or various other issues that you may find it difficult to write applications, there are some grant funders that you can apply for personal access costs. So for example, the Arts Council will pay a personal access worker to help you write your application. So that wouldn't cost you anything. So I'm actually registered on the Arts Council as a personal access coach. So I do that with people. So what they do is they register on Arts Council, they apply to Arts Council to get me to help them write their application, and then we spend 2 days together actually writing that application together on Zoom meetings. So that's one way that you can access Arts Council without spending any money on bid writers for free, because they will cover that. Always check with your other grant funders if they offer a similar service. Now, I do know the National Lottery don't as yet, but I think that should be coming in at some point, because I just think it's a really important service and it helps break down those barriers for people. So how soon, realistically, are you going to be able to get your grant funding in? Well, I've had people do my course and have got their first grants within 6 to 8 weeks of doing my course. So realistically, you can get it quite fast. It does depend on what grant you're applying to, how competitive it is at the moment, and how good your application is, and if it's very unique and it really hits their priorities. Think about it strategically. How can you meet their priorities? So if, for instance, you're doing more of an arts-based project, you've got to go for Arts Council, sports. When it comes to Awards for All, which is the community fund with the National Lottery, bear in mind that everybody applies for that. So it's got everybody in it. So it's obviously going to be more competitive. So sometimes going for the ones like Arts Council or Sports England or the Heritage Lottery Fund are a bit easier to get, because they are more specialist. So when you have to go for the main pots that everybody's going for, of course, it's going to be more competitive. So think about it strategically and go for the pot that you think you're most likely to get first. So UN LTD Foundation is one pot that actually covers startup costs, those setup costs. And they are a great one to go for, but they are, again, quite competitive. So they don't cover staff costs, but they cover basically all your other setup costs, so things like insurance, all those other sort of things that you need, materials and stuff to get going. So that is one thing that you could look at first. So I usually recommend people start with UN LTD, but do just bear in mind it is competitive. So don't, assume that you're going to get it. Don't go for that, but also apply for some other ones as well. So what are the types of things you should budget for on your applications, and how much money can you put down for yourself? So first of all, I would make sure you cover your basics, which are insurance. So you're going to need public liability insurance. You're going to need directors insurance. So I have got a link about insurance, which I'll put in the video. So insurance is an important one to get going first of all, so you're covered legally before you do any work. Next is, of course, the website. So it is a good idea to get your website. Like I said, it looks good for grant funders. You can get that on, say, Wix or somebody like that for 140-ish. Then you're going to need some kind of setup costs for whatever it is you're delivering. So if you're doing workshops, assuming that you're going to need materials, you might need to hire equipment. So whatever it is you're doing, you're of course going to need to cover all of the costs for that. So just bear in mind things like renting, hiring places. Make sure you get things budgeted properly. So don't put guesstimates. This is one of the main things I see that people do wrong, is they just guess amounts. They just chunk off a few thousand here or there. A grant funder will look at that and often turn it down because it doesn't look budgeted properly. You need to get proper, accurate budgets. Do not guess your budget, because if they award you that, they will expect you to stick to it, and they will audit you afterwards and check to see if you actually spent things out the way you said you would. So it's really important to get things right. Get 3 quotes if you can. So really shop around. Get they want to see that you're being competitive and that you're not just going for the first offer. Other essentials can be things like DBS checks if you're working with children or vulnerable adults. Maybe safeguarding training if that's also something that you're going to need. You may have some other kind of training or something that you could put down. In terms of premises, just remember it's never a good idea to buy assets, whether it's to do premises or equipment. So you don't really want to be buying stuff like that because you don't want assets in your CIC. Grant funders generally don't like paying for assets. They much prefer that you hire things. So one way to get around that is if you have an LTD, have your LTD buy the equipment, have your LTD buy the property or actually lease a property. And then your CIC can hire from it. So your CIC will hire from your LTD any equipment or obviously property or room rental or workshop hire or whatever. So your CIC can then hire at that hiring rate. So that's a good way of getting money over to you. That is something that the grant funders prefer. They prefer that hire strategy. And then when it comes to your pay, at this point you must be paying yourself properly. Don't listen to anybody who says that you shouldn't be paying yourself and you should be working for free. That's absolute nonsense. I've been paying myself for 10 years to work on my CICs, and everybody that I work with, I get them to do the same and they get approved for grant funding. So you should be paying yourself. So what should you be paying yourself? So it depends on the project. Arts Council expect a lead artist to be paying themselves around 340 a day, whereas the lottery, if you're a sessional worker on a project, they prefer you to pay around 150 a day. So it kind of depends on the grant funder. Feel free to ask them as well, but I've got lots of videos on this channel which cover different grant funders and what they expect to pay you. Do make sure you break down your pay. So they like to see exactly what you're paying for. So break down. So instead of putting like 8,000 to you, break it down. So do 3,000 for the workshops. Actually being the lead person on the workshops. Maybe 2,000 for administration time. Maybe 1,000 for social media and all that production stuff. So actually break it down. They prefer it when you break it down. So once you get your grant fund in, you'll be laughing. You'll be able to set everything up. And of course, on that first grant that you're going to get in, that's going to be covering a lot more of your sort of basic overheads. But once that's all done and paid for, then the next grant funding pot that you go for can be more about paying you and staff. So as you go, things will be easier, and it's great to be able to get a good stock in from your grant funds. I mean, for instance, behind me, I've got masses of paint left over from projects. I've got, stock that I've, got from project grants. So it just helps that over time, you build up, equipment and all these things. So it just brings your project costs down later on. So that's it. I hope that was useful for you. If you've got, I know that pay and stuff like that is a minefield, and you might have some extra questions. So if you do, you can jump in the comments, but it's actually a better way to communicate with me if you go to my website and jump in the chat, because I'll see that straight away and I reply every day to those messages. So go over to my website, jump in the chat if you've got any questions at all. And if you're interested in doing my course, that is over there as well. So you can go and check that out.